even though I'm not a lawyer, as everyone on Twitter likes to tell me, I did look at this record. I did look at this document by the government, and it's crap. The other big issue is the improper nature of the warrant itself. As I said, there was really no good faith basis for it because these were personal records, so to tell a court otherwise is dishonest in my view. But on top of that, they went in there and sought records way beyond what, in my view, they should have been able to seek. And one of the results of this court process about the special master has been the requirement that a more complete inventory of the records that were seized at Trump's home be released. And that inventory was released. I'm presuming it's correct, but because it's the FBI, I don't trust that it's necessarily correct. But it confirms that they took thousands of records that weren't classified, but were, quote, government records. As I say, if that's the case, then they were probably his. And that there were lots of records that were obviously personal. They took, 1,000 pages plus, I think, of newspaper articles going back to 2008. They took books. They took clothing. They took what was obvious to them personal gifts because they listed them as, clothing/personal gifts. So what type of warrant allows someone to go in, a law enforcement officer to go in and vacuum up all these obviously unrelated records? I think an improper warrant. And it further suggests that maybe they just wanted to get everything they could possibly get. And they really were just using the Presidential Records Act and this manufactured dispute about the records as a pretext to get in there and just see what he had. And sure enough, that's what they did. They took out everything they could. And despite the court saying she is interested in appointing a special master, despite the court being suspicious of whether they appropriately protected the president's records that there's no doubt they weren't allowed to have, they continue to review these records. In fact, they've escalated it and said now there's a damage assessment going on with the Office of Director of National Intelligence, and they're sharing some of these allegedly classified records with them in order, again, to make it seem like there is this national security crisis with Trump having records that he had every right under the law to have. And let's say he didn't have rights to these records. He certainly had a good faith understanding that these records typically are treated as personal. And if the government wanted to allege they're classified, I guess the government can allege anything. But the idea that you would go in and say these records are such and therefore should be subject to a warrant, when in fact there is a dispute about the very nature of the records, a dispute the government refuses to acknowledge, but they carefully word their briefs that suggests that they do know what I'm talking about. Because, for instance, they reference records as being marked as classified. They avoid calling them classified records. They reference records as being government records. Now, this may be a little in the weeds, but for those of us who work in the records business and the quote government records business, that's a phrase that no one really uses. Like a layman may use it, or someone who's not familiar with the records process in Washington, D.C., but the FBI knows that the phrase government records really doesn't have much of a meaning. We've got presidential records, we have federal records, we have agency records. Government records, as you can, I think, see, doesn't really tell you anything. So they're playing games, even this inventory. So what you should recognize is that all the court filings the Justice Department have been making are propaganda filings designed to justify politically their political raid, and hopefully in a way that convinces a court to give them a pass. Thankfully, the courts are seemingly skeptical, so I don't know how far that's going to go in terms of policing them. But that's something that you should understand as you evaluate these things. I know, given the fact that many of you are clear-thinking Americans, you kind of guessed that there's something up. I mean, you have the president raiding the home of a former president. That obviously is sketchy. But believe you me, that when you examine the legal basis here and what the government's putting out, I mean, I read this brief. So even though I'm not a lawyer, as everyone on Twitter likes to tell me, I did look at this record. I did look at this document by the government, and it's crap. You don't have to be a lawyer to see that it's political. You can be a citizen who, again, can read, and you can see they're being dishonest, leaving out key information, begging questions in this filing. Now, the left would like you to believe that no one is allowed to question the Justice Department or the FBI. And, of course, that's not the way America works. And that's not the way Judicial Watch works. Because our experience with the Justice Department and the FBI is that they're corrupt agencies, top to bottom. And does it mean everyone in there is corrupt? Of course not. But institutionally, again, top to bottom, they are corrupt. So if there are good people in there, it really doesn't matter to the operations of the organization, because they're immaterial to what the organization does, both at the Justice Department and at the FBI. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.